Welcome to VMware vSphere training from ESX Lab. I'm your instructor, Larry Karnas, and in this first lab task, what we're going to do is connect to the console of the ESXi host that we want to install ESXi on. So to do that, we're going to do a number of things. Now, how you connect to your console will depend on your infrastructure. In my case, I run a virtual lab environment, and I need to connect to my infrastructure server to pop open a console on that lab environment. So I am going to start with Firefox. And so from Firefox, what I'm going to do is reach out to my infrastructure server. And log in. Now, my infrastructure server does not use verifiable certificates, it uses self-signed certificates. So I'm just going to go ahead and accept the security warning. So we will add an exception. We will permanently confirm the exception. And the reason I'm doing this is because my infrastructure server is on an isolated internal network that's protected from everyday PC access and outside world access. So I am going to log in with a username and password that was created when I built this lab environment. And again, you may or may not be using an infrastructure server. If you're doing virtual ESXi labs, you will probably have one. If you're doing physical ESXi labs, then you would just go to the physical console of your machine. So I'm going to log in. This may take a few seconds. And so in this case, we go to the home screen. We go to VMs and templates. Again, this is just what's required on my infrastructure server. I expand inventory, and what I see is two virtual machines on my infrastructure server. They are both powered off, and the first one is a pre-built virtual machine, but it has nothing installed on it, and it's not powered on. And so my task here is to actually do a couple of things. The first one is I need to open a console on this VM, but I can't do it right now because if I try open with VMRC, what I'll actually see is that the version of VMRC that's available is too old. So I can try. So we'll connect anyway, and we just get an error. So I'm going to dismiss this, close the tab, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to upgrade the VMRC Remote Console application. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to launch File Explorer. I'm going to map a network drive where I've downloaded VMware Install Media Images. I'm going to give it the V drive letter, and I'm going to go to the UNC name, and this is unique to my lab environment. So 192.168.20.17 is the IP address of my file share server. vSphere 8.0 is the name of the share, and I do want to reconnect at login, so I'm going to say finish. Once it connects, I get a File Explorer window on the share, and I can see that the VMRC application, which upgrades VMRC from the previous version, which was 10 or 11, to VMRC 12. VMRC is VMware Remote Console, so we're just going to do an install on that. And again, you would download this from VMware's download portal. So I'm going to right-click, say Open, and I'll say Run. We are going to work through the installer doing a mostly default install. It does take a few seconds to initialize. And then what happens is the initial installer unpacks the MSI file and then launches the baked-in installer inside the MSI file. So we're going to activate that. Click Next. accept the end user license agreement, say next. We're going to do a install into the default location, so that's fine. And we are going to not check for product updates. Normally you would do that. In my lab book, which I am following, the lab tasks are written for this version of VMware Remote Console, and sometimes VMware makes changes, like they add or change functionality, they reorganize things and so on. So I don't want that to get in my way. So for now, I'm not going to check for product updates. And I am going to join the VMware Customer Experience Improvement Program. So in exchange for telemetry data, they will give me updates. And down the road for ESXi, we will see that they will give me, they will do some health monitoring and other sorts of things. So we'll say next. We will upgrade. So it will remove the old version of VMRC, install a new version of the VMRC, and then when we launch VMRC, instead of getting the error that we just saw, we'll actually be able to connect to our VM. So we'll say finish. I don't need the file share anymore, so I'm going to dismiss it. I don't need File Explorer anymore, so I'll dismiss that. So all I've done is install an upgraded version of VMRC, so I'm going to click the same link, and now it connects. So what I want to do next is I want to move on and actually do an initial install of ESXi 8.0. And to do that, I'm going to power on the virtual machine. Okay, so it's powering on. Oh, that's fine. That's because I clicked the power on like twice. Now, what are we looking at here? Let's go back to the console. So in my lab environment, it would be very challenging for me to actually work with physical CD/DVD install media or even virtual CD/DVD install media. So what we do instead is we've set the boot order for a virtual ESXi host to be USB first, hard disk second, CD/DVD third, and network boot last. Because our virtual ESXi host has not been installed, it's just an empty machine, it can't boot off of any of the above items except network. So in our lab environment, we use something called the Ultimate Deployment Appliance, and we have different versions of ESXi that we can select from. We would click in the window, and this way I can go way back to legacy versions of ESXi or install the latest greatest version of ESXi. So let's install the latest greatest. So I just literally hit enter. Now what you'll see is the installer pulls down all of the packages that make up ESXi. These are exactly the same packages that you would get if you downloaded ESXi install media from VMware. So there's nothing custom here. There's no magic going on. All we've done is we've created a network PXE boot server, PXE pre-boot execution environment. So you can see it pulls down all the packages. It does take a little bit of time. Once all of the packages are pulled down, the VM kernel is initialized. That's the core OS component of your ESXi operating system. And then what it does is it loads and initializes various packages and modules, and this will take a few minutes. Now I'm going to move the screen because you can actually see a progress bar. There we go. Let's move it up just a little bit more. Now the installer will hang or appear to hang when it's about 98% done, and it will sit there for perhaps a minute or more as the installer loads the final modules. We'll just wait. And the installer has initialized. So when you see this screen, the installer is actually ready to go. And I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, it tells you the version of ESXi you're installing. It tells you that ESXi 8.0.0 will install on most PC server systems, not desktops, not notebooks, server class hardware. And VMware publishes a compatibility guide because for guaranteed support, all of the hardware running ESXi must be in the compatibility guide and must be supported. And sometimes support may depend on firmware versions or configurations or things like that. So before you go shopping for hardware, make sure you check that all of the hardware you're going to put in your ESXi host is supported. Now, this is a character cell-based user interface. I can't click anything. When I try, my mouse just goes away. So the prompts, it tells you what to do. So I'm going to click in the window and hit enter. I get the standard end user license agreement, and I'm going to have to hit F11 right here. I'm going to have to hit F11 to continue. So again, I click in the window, hit F11, and what happens at this point in time is the installer does a PCIe bus scan for storage controllers. For each storage controller, it goes looking for channels and targets and volumes, and it will organize them into either local volumes, which are directly attached to your ESXi host server, or remote volumes, which are accessible through a SAN controller. In this case, we only have a local volume, and we can see that it is a 350 gigabyte local volume. Now, if we had multiple volumes, we could click in the window, arrow up and down, and select the volume we wanted. But we don't, so we're just going to use the volume that's here. So I will hit enter. If I want to see details, I can hit F1, and it will pull up a little more detail about the underlying hardware that it's discovered. This is just to help you understand what it's looking at so that you pick the right volume. So in this particular case, it's a VMware virtual disk. Here's its hardware runtime path. I'll talk more about this as we go through the course. It thinks it's a parallel SCSI controller and device. It thinks the hardware address is device or logical unit 0 on controller 0. The raw capacity is 350 gigs, and there is no prior ESXi install on this. This is a fresh volume. And it thinks that the backing storage is not an SSD device, so that means it thinks it's a spinning disk. So we're going to hit enter. That makes the extra information go away. I'm going to hit enter to continue. That gives the installer permission to use that volume, and it will repartition the volume. So anything that's on that volume would be deleted. So that's why you want to use an empty volume. So we're going to use the default US keyboard, and I'm going to set the local root account password. So the password is going to be what I normally use in my lab environment, which is ESXlab.c0m and ESXlab.c0m. And you notice it does say that the passwords match. Pay attention to this. So we can move on. By the way, do not forget your password. There is no easy way to recover your password from a standalone ESXi host. You literally have to do a reinstall. Now, the error warning here is a warning, and it says that the CPUs in my lab environment are getting a little bit old, and that if I wanted to run this in a production environment, I should get servers with fully supported CPUs as opposed to my lab environment that doesn't run any production workloads, so legacy CPUs will work but are not suitable for production. So we'll hit enter, and that's literally it. So to install the operating system, I hit F11, and it will take a few minutes to actually partition the volume, format the partitions, copy all the packages to the partitions, and then format the remaining space on the volume, because remember the volume is 350 gigs, to a single large VMFS data store that I can use for future virtual machine purposes. So we'll just let this complete. And we are done. Now, if we take a closer look at the end of install message, it says the install is complete and that the install has been done successfully. We will get to operate ESXi for 60 days in evaluation mode, and in that time, 100% of ESXi's features will be available for you to use without a permanent license key. What do we do next? We just simply reboot. So we hit enter. The host will do an orderly shutdown. It will take a few seconds, and then the host will reboot. And we'll just wait for that to happen. Now you'll notice when we're booting off of direct attached storage, ESXi is much faster to load. It will take a few seconds to initialize ESXi, all of its devices and all of its software components, but nowhere near as long as it took to actually do the install. And you can see in the yellow part of the screen the components that are being initialized. And the progress bars are not linear. Sometimes they will sit for a longer period of time, and it would even appear that the machine might be locked up. And I would counsel patience. The machine is fine. Some things just take longer than others. And here we go. Our ESXi host is now freshly installed with the default configuration. In this particular case, I get a limited amount of information. I can see the make and model of processors my server's running. I can see the amount of RAM my server has. And down here, I can see both the IPv4 and IPv6 addresses that the server has been assigned. The IPv4 address, 192.168.20.140, was assigned by a local DHCP server, and the IPv6 address, I'm not going to read it out, was locally generated. So that's how you do a basic install of ESXi 8.0. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to do post-install configuration tasks specifically to set the network properties so that we can connect to our management network. I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching. Hi, and thanks for watching our VMware vSphere 8.0 hands-on lab demo video. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more hands-on lab demos, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions or feedback, please leave us a comment below. Our videos are based on our VMware vSphere 8.0 Bootcamp course. You can get a free 74-page sample of our Bootcamp course lab guide using the links in the notes below. Or you can get the entire updated 286-page Bootcamp lab guide at more than 75% off by using a second link, again in the notes below. Thanks again for watching, and take care.